Out of my road, nigga. Yeah, you going with the pack? This motherfucker think he's special. You hear this motherfucker?
In one of the most dangerous underground fighting rings in Los Angeles, a silent stranger walks in. No one knows who he is or why he's here, but when the fights begin, the entire arena goes silent. One by one, the strongest fighters fall, crushed by a man who barely speaks, yet fights like a machine. His name is Bone, played by Michael Jai White, a former prisoner with fists of steel and a mysterious mission. But Bone isn't fighting for money, and he's not fighting for fame. He's fighting to keep a promise. And when the ruthless crime lord running the underground ring realizes the truth, Bone becomes the most dangerous enemy he's ever faced. So how did one quiet ex-prisoner bring an entire criminal empire to its knees? Let's break it down. Welcome to USA Fight Recaps. The opening scene begins in a prison bathroom, where a group of more than 5 inmates attempts to confront Bone. Danny, Bone's friend, becomes frightened by the overwhelming number of attackers and urgently warns Bone to run before Jason and his gang severely beat him. Rather than fleeing, he calmly prepares to teach them a lesson they will never forget. Within moments, Bone dismantles the entire group with astonishing speed and precision, as if the fight were effortless, leaving the attackers completely defeated. Despite his overwhelming dominance, Bone chooses not to kill them. Instead, he warns Jason never to threaten him or anyone close to him again. In the next scene, 2 unruly young men are seen harassing an elderly man named Roberto. After Roberto tells them to leave, the youths insult and mistreat him before finally walking away. Soon afterward, Bone is released from prison. He travels to Los Angeles and enters the dangerous world of illegal underground street fighting, where the only rule is survival. Searching for a place to stay, Bone arrives at the home of Tamara, a woman who cares for children and maintains strict rules for her tenants. She refuses to rent to gangsters, prohibits women from visiting, and insists on strict discipline within her home. She warns Bone about these conditions, expecting him to decline. To her surprise, Bone calmly accepts the rules and pays the rent before taking the room. To survive in Los Angeles, Bone needs a way to earn money. Fortunately, he discovers a gathering place where gamblers watch brutal street fights and wager large sums as fighters battle each other. The operation is run by James, a wealthy and arrogant man who dresses in expensive suits and behaves as though he owns everything around him. Another key figure in this underground world is Pinball, a fast-talking street hustler and fight promoter. While observing one of the fights, Bone watches as a fighter known as Hammerman brutally defeats another opponent. Despite the violence, Pinball declares Hammerman the winner and hands the betting money over to James. Seeing an opportunity, Bone approaches Pinball shortly afterward and convinces him to arrange a fight. Initially hesitant, Pinball eventually agrees after Bone offers him $260. They agree on terms. If Bone wins using his own money, Pinball receives 20%. If Pinball invests his own money, he receives 40%. Pinball introduces Bone to James and his crew. James attempts to intimidate him, but Bone remains calm and completely unfazed. In his first underground fight, Bone faces a massive opponent with enormous muscles and intimidating strength. The crowd is stunned, and Bone immediately becomes the most feared fighter in the room. From that moment forward, Bone's reputation begins to spread throughout the underground fighting scene. However, it soon becomes evident that Bone's motivations go beyond money. Bone later asks Pinball about Angela Soto, the widow of a fellow inmate who was brutally murdered in prison. Meanwhile, James is not merely organizing underground fights. He is also involved in other secretive and illegal operations. In fact, he works for a mysterious syndicate. That very night, he eliminates Franklin McVeigh, an extremely powerful figure whose influence makes typical villains seem insignificant. Later, at Tamara's house, Bone is seen calmly playing chess with Roberto. Suddenly, a pair of troublesome youths arrive and attempt to harass Roberto. However, when they notice Bone, their confidence quickly disappears, and they run away immediately, never returning. Shortly afterward, Bone's manager and friend, Pinball, arrives to pick him up for another fight. Before Bone's next fight begins, Veretta is seen brutally attacking a colleague. Soon after, Pinball approaches Tattoo and offers him $5,000 to send his strongest fighter against Bone. Accepting the challenge, Tattoo releases the so-called Golden Grill fighter into the ring. However, the match ends almost instantly when Bone knocks him down with a single devastating punch. The stakes quickly escalate when Tattoo decides to double the number of fighters in an attempt to defeat Bone. Surprisingly, Bone defeats all of them, even taking on more than 3 opponents at once. The situation becomes almost comical when Tattoo refuses to pay the wager. Pinball returns home with far more money than they initially expected. With every victory, Bone continues climbing the ranks of the underground fighting world. His style is devastating, perfect technique, lightning-fast strikes, and no wasted movement. Through these fights, he continues earning significant money for Pinball, which becomes evident when Pinball upgrades his car. When Bone returns home afterward, Tamara is shocked by the severe injuries he has sustained. She tries to ask him what happened, but Bone refuses to explain. Despite this, Tamara carefully treats his wounds. She then reveals that she has seen him practicing Tai Chi several times. Bone responds by teaching her some of the movements. Elsewhere, James once again demonstrates his ruthless personality. He chases a woman with his car and shows absolutely no compassion or respect for human life.
She's messed up.
Soon, preparations begin for a major fight between Bone and the fearsome Hammerman, a match that everyone is eager to witness. Hammerman is injected with performance-enhancing drugs to increase his strength, and many believe he will easily defeat Bone. Pinball proudly declares Bone the winner. Although James hesitates, he ultimately has no choice but to pay the winnings. Later, James approaches Bone personally, praising his remarkable talent and inviting him to discuss a potential business partnership. At James's residence, Bone arrives with Pinball. James questions him about where he learned his impressive fighting skills, but Bone remains calm and largely uninterested in answering. He then offers Bone a deal to fight exclusively for him. However, Bone remains reluctant. Aware of James's true nature, he simply tells him he will consider the proposal before making any commitment. To further persuade him, James sends Angela Soto to Bone as a supposed gift. Out of respect for Angela's late husband, Bone's close friend who was murdered in prison, Bone treats her with dignity. In reality, Bone intends to avenge his friend and honor the promise he made to protect the man's family once he was released. After speaking with Angela and hearing her story, Bone asks her to return to James and pretend that everything went well between them. Surprisingly, James later allows Bone to leave with Angela. Bone secretly takes her to a safe location before returning home. Meanwhile, James approaches Price with a lucrative offer, $5 million to arrange a major fight. James believes that if Bone wins, the profits will be enormous. Initially hesitant, Price eventually agrees after further negotiation. However, James has already invested the money even though Bone has not yet confirmed his participation. Back at Tamara's house, Bone and Tamara share a quiet moment together. Suddenly, James arrives and causes chaos. Desperate to control Bone, he tries various methods to force him into fighting for him, including kidnapping the people Bone cares about. However, Bone already has a plan. When intimidation fails, James sends his men along with the giant Hammerman to attack. But Bone manages to save them. Later, James receives information about Angela's location and sends his men there, only to discover that it was a trap. Bone and Pinball defeat them all. When James calls to confirm the situation, Bone answers the phone himself and warns him that he is coming for him. Furious, James sends Bone a GPS location. Pretending to follow his instructions, Bone heads to the location where the final confrontation is about to take place. With Pinball's help, Bone secretly records James making incriminating confessions. The final fight becomes legendary. Bone faces James's strongest fighter, a monstrous opponent who initially appears unbeatable. However, Bone cleverly allows his opponent to be declared the winner in order to cause James to lose a massive amount of money. Enraged, James finally confronts Bone directly. But Bone does not need another fight to defeat him. With cold precision, with his mission accomplished, Bone quietly walks away without celebration or recognition. Later, Angela learns about James's arrest and reunites with her son. Tamara feels both emotional and proud of Bone, yet he chooses to leave. Pinball waits outside to offer him a ride, but this time Bone declines and decides to walk away on his own. James's empire is completely destroyed. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're new to our channel. You can support us by sending a gift or super thanks. We love you.